So tonight, in Mirza Hashem, we'll start getting into the mood for Purim. After all, it's already Adar. And we're going to learn Likutei Halachos. Of all places, I never would have thought I would find anything about Purim in Hilchos Nefilas Apayim. But Rabbi Nosson, stretches his arm out and encompasses all areas of halacha, and they're all one. He unifies them and connects them together. So we're going to look now at Nefilas Apayim, Dalid, and its subcategory Dalid. So it's Dalid, Dalid. He writes, Zeh b'chinas Purim, she'ikar mitzvahs Purim hu lismoach b'chol eis. Interesting. Simcha is a general mitzvah, a general obligation that applies to every single mitzvah, but it applies to Purim in a very unique way. So through the prism of Purim, we get a grasp, we get a kind of a glimpse at what Simcha is all about. L'sameach es atzmo b'chol midei simcha. Interesting that Simcha is a personal obligation vis-a-vis myself to be mesameach myself in all sorts of simcha. L'sameach es atzmo b'chol midei simcha. And that's how we interpret the pasuk. Lasos osam yemei mishte v'simcha. Make them for you days of simcha and mishte. That's a personal obligation. That's not something to shy away from, and it's not something insignificant. We're not saying that it's something easy, just snap your fingers and get yourself into a state of simcha, but that's what lasos osam, we have to make them into yemei mishte v'simcha. And it's interesting because in the philosophy of Rabbi Nosson, simcha is the opposite of atzvus, of sadness. And sadness is the most powerful tool of the sitra achra, of the forces of evil. So we have this interesting, sort of two sides on a battlefield or on a sports field, like football players, one against the other. You've got the sitra achra pushing for atzvus, and you've got the good side that's pushing for simcha to fight and neutralize atzvus. And that's how you can defeat the sitra achra. The greatest tool against the sitra achra is going to be simcha. If we can only achieve simcha, everything else is going to fall into place. And the interesting concept here is yemei simcha. The days have to be days of simcha. What does that mean? Why did Rabbi Nosson put all the emphasis on the days of simcha? I mean, simcha is in the lev, it's in the heart, it's in the emotions, it's inside a person. Why days of simcha? And in fact, in Purim, we have 2 days of simcha. We have the 14th of Adar and the 15th of Adar. So yemei simcha. What is the emphasis on Yomim? So I want to share with you an insight of Rabbi Nosson. It's actually here in this set of essays called Likutei Halachos and Orchaim in Hilchos Kriyas HaTorah. And he writes that a person should tell himself every day that he's a birya chadasha, a brand new creature. Whatever he was yesterday, forget about it. A person is down on himself for what happened yesterday. He messed up. He had disappointments. Today is a brand new day. And therefore we recite the bracha every morning, Amachzir Nishamos Lefgar Mason. The neshama is coming back to me. Yesterday was a different day. I went to sleep. Sleep is 1/60th of death. Now I wake up in the morning, I'm a new birya, and I face the day with new energy. And this new energy, which cuts me off from yesterday and all the failings and disappointments and shortcomings of yesterday, allows me to achieve a Yom Simcha, to create the day as a day of Simcha. And once again, it's a great challenge because I am physically the same person, or biologists say that, our cells regenerate themselves, but fundamentally, I'm the same person with the same psyche, the same name, the same physical body. I'm maybe I'm 1 day older, but otherwise I'm the same age. So to take this to heart, that today is a new day, and I'm starting brand new. When I was a child, if anyone is old enough to remember, there was a game called Etch-a-Sketch. You remember that? The children loved it. And with your finger, you could make different, indentations on the screen and squiggle and squiggles, and you can make beautiful things. And then you shake it up and it starts from scratch. That's what every day is. Every day is like taking the Etch-a-Sketch and starting anew. And that's what he says. Nogim kol Yisrael l'svot b'chol mini simchas b'Purim to ikar mitzvahs Purim ki ikar hachnos hasitra achra. If you're asking how we defeat the Sitra Achra's father, so to speak, father figure, is the Nachash HaKadmoni. In Kabbalah, in the Arizal, it's all about the Nachash HaKadmoni that tries to bring man down. It tries to say to man, you have to reach a higher level. You have to strive for something greater, because right now, who are you? You have nothing. So you have to eat from the Eitz Hadas. And he somehow is able to seduce man to eat from the Eitz Hadas by telling man that he has to strive for something greater, that he's on too low a level. And which nation on the face of the earth, and I'm expecting everyone to answer this question, is the personification of the Nachash? Of course, Amalek. And that's what Purim is all about. Purim is all about defeating Amalek and defeating those who try to take us down and try to get us down and try to bring us to a state of atzmus and tell us that we're nothing. Look what you did, and look at your failings. You didn't daven properly. You put on tefillin from rote like a machine. And all the mitzvahs that you did were like, you were addicted to them because you were trained to them, but you had no feeling and no emotion, and you weren't uplifted and inspired by them. You put nothing into your mitzvahs. They're all full of shortcomings and blemishes. And if you remember, my friends, last week when we studied Hashkamas HaBoker in Rabbi Nassan, the main idea was to wake up in the morning with renewed energy, with a zest, a surge to move on and face the new day. And in order to do so, you recall that the emphasis was on the Nekuda Tova. When you think about all your shortcomings, it's just going to bring you down. That's not the way of waking up in the morning. If you're down, you want to stay in bed. And if it's cold outside, you want to stay under the warm quilt. What's going to give you that Hiskaber Kari of the Shulchan Aruch, as he opens up his magnum opus, the Shulchan Aruch? Hiskaber Kari could only be based on the fact that I look at the good in me. And if I look at the good in me, this is hard because sometimes I have a very bad day. I was guilty of this, and I got angry, and my tefillin, my tzitzis, my Kriyat Shema was garnished. There was nothing. My mind was who knows where. I don't know if it was, in Israel or in Chutz La'aretz. I don't know where I was thinking. And now I have to focus on the good. And if I focus on the good, then there's something called mishpat. There's something called judgment up on high. And the judgment in the heavenly courts is going to focus on the good. Why? Because I'm identifying myself with that good, with that Nekuda Tova. I'm cutting myself off. I'm actually disconnecting myself from all the evil and all the failings and the shortcomings. No. Who am I? I am the good points. I am what I did right. And if I can identify with what I did right, then Azamra Lashem Bichvodi. Chvodi means my nefesh. Azamra I can sing. And in the Kabbalah of the Arizal, there are 10 categories of nigunim, of song, and they all represent a blend and a personification of good, of Nekudas Tovos. In fact, Shiras HaLevim in the Beis HaMikdash represents the sum total of all of the Nekudas Tovos of all of Klal Yisrael that are integrated into one whole, one tzibur, one entity called Knesset Yisrael, and that's the Mishkan. And now he says that Machniim Klipas Haman Amalek Sheu Ikar Zuamas Hanocha Shenimchach Al Yidei Chet Eitzadas Umisham Achizas Haman Arosh Yamach Shemo. So who is Haman? What does he represent? He represents the Nachash. He represents the idea that we should break away from tradition, that we should create our own religion, that we should be aware of the fact that everything that happens to us in life, chas v'sholom, has nothing to do with hashgacha. If you won a lottery ticket, that's a matter of mikra. Ki karcha b'derech. It's all mikra. And the nachash represents the antithesis to hashgacha. And if we have to achieve simcha, simcha can only be achieved if we have the emunah, the faith in hashgacha pratis, in man's ability to make a choice, and hopefully to make the right choice. And when we make the wrong choice, let's not get ourselves down. Let's not be totally bogged down and chained to those Nefilos, those times that we couldn't live up, and instead we fell short. Where is the source for Haman in the Torah? It's the Eitz Hadas. It's the Nachash HaKadmoni. Hamin is Hey, Mem, Nun. Osios Haman. Haman Rasha, Ubechinas Pgam, Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra. Shal Yidei Zeh Nimshach Zuamas HaNachash V'Ikar Zuamas HaNachash and Zuamas Haman Bechinas Atzvus. That's their method. We have to keep this in mind, my friends. I'm talking to myself. The enemy of man, the enemy of striving for God, of his chazkus, of his karvus, is atzvus. When you're down, you can't move, you can't function. All you can think of is black, despair. And psychiatrists will tell you that the most difficult treatment, because the most difficult mental disease, emotional disorder is atzvus. Of course, Rabbi Nosson wrote it 190 years ago. And that's the method of the Klipas HaNachash, which is Haman, which is Amalek, to try to bring us down with atzvus. Ki ikar sitra achra hu ha'atzvus. And therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to man, V'it savon tochlena, kotes v'dardar tatzmiach, v'zeas apecha tochalechem. All of these klolos, which is mida keneged mida, are all about V'it savon. V'it savon miloshen atzvus. We could read this word 1,000 times and not pay attention to it. And this atzvus is really anathema. It's really the main pollution and contamination of the Sitra Achra, of the Nachash HaKadmoni, of Haman and Amalek, and that's what we have to fight against constantly. And by the way, you'll meet people and you'll say to yourselves, wow, I never saw such a happy person. He's got a smile on his face, like pasted down to his face. But sometimes we can't judge a book by its cover. And this man may be dancing in the streets, but underneath it all, he has moments in which he's pulled down. And the facade sometimes fools us because these forces of the Nachash HaKadmoni are not always obvious. They seep in, sometimes clandestinely, without you realizing it. They're working below the surface, thinking of ways of getting you to focus on the evil part of yourselves, on the failings and the shortcomings, instead of focusing on the Nekud Tova. The Ikar HaKedusha Hu HaSimcha. This is unbelievable. We have now thesis and antithesis. We have X and its opposite. We've got Simcha and we've got Atzvus. Now we have a new equation to identify Kedusha as Simcha and Simcha as Kedusha. Lismach Hashem. Where is Simcha? What is Simcha? Is it all about, winning the lottery ticket, as we mentioned earlier? Is it because I graduated first in my class, Phi Beta Kappa, and I got accepted to the best, most prestigious medical schools, graduate schools? Is it because I got a raise or I got an upgrade in my position in the firm? Is that what Simcha is all about? All that is here today and gone tomorrow. There's nothing eternal about it. There's nothing spiritual about it. It does not connect to the infinite. The only thing that connects to the infinite is the Almighty God himself. And Simcha has to come from a relationship to the Almighty, and taking the Almighty and allowing him to be your accompanied friend, to be with you all the time. As the Shulchan Aruch opens up, the Ramah, Shivisi Hashem L'negbi Summit. I told you last time the story of the Hilchos of Lublin, right? Ki yeshlo emuna shlema b'Hashem. Imagine a person who lost his job, Rachmana litzlan. His boss said, "I can't pay you anymore," whatever it is, and now he's looking for another job. He's looking high and low, and he's trying to figure out where to turn and network and everything else. Can he achieve Simcha? Yes. How? Not easy. No one's telling you it's an easy climb. It's a challenge. But it all depends on emunah. If a person has faith, the Gemara says at the end of Makos that all 613 mitzvahs are really one mitzvah. You can reduce it to one single mitzvah. Tzadik emunah so yichya. It's all about emunah. If a person has emunah, the Rabbi Nosson writes that the first thought that should come to your mind when you wake up in the morning is the Alma Diasi, the next world. Why? Why not think about this world? Why next world? He wants us to have an orientation and a connection to infinity rather than be connected towards this world, which is finite. We belong to infinity. Imagine, my Rebbe used to always talk about the existential concept of fear of death. The animals are not aware of death. They don't have fear of death. Man suffers from the fear of death. And that's part of the curse that was given to Adam HaRishon. But you know what? There's something that could go beyond fear of death. And that's a difficult situation. Could you imagine? The existential philosophers believe that this is part of existential condition of man. Man is aware of the fact that he can't live forever. With every minute, he comes closer to the day of death. How do we live with that? The answer is emunah. The answer is wake up in the morning and think about the Alma Diasi. Think about the fact that there's a greater world than this world, that there's a finite world that we live in today, and there's an infinite world that we're going to. And death need not create such a fear. On the contrary, with emunah, we achieve simcha because we realize that God has given us this glorious opportunity to live, to breathe, to function, to appreciate and acknowledge God's gifts. What a chesed. Man could have been created as a limited intellect, in which case he would not appreciate all the great gifts that God bestows upon him. And if at every moment of our waking day, we have a sense, whether it's consciously or latent awareness, we have a sense of godliness, of the great opportunities that God has bestowed upon us. What greater simcha could there be? And these opportunities are in this world, but ultimately will live in the next world. Is therefore Misha Yeshlo Emuna Shlema Bashem Yisparach Bevadai Roy Lismach Tamid. Tamid. He's always in a state of simcha. Bashem Yisparach. He says, I can't explain it in writing. It's absolutely individual and subjective. No two people have the same experience of simcha. No two people have the same level of emunah. They deny hashgacha pratis. Everything is just a matter of luck, of accident. Asher karcha b'derech. Umehem, and from this root, this origin called the Nachash and Amalek and Haman, Nimchach Ikar Ha'atzvus V'Amarash Chora, dark, dingy despair comes from these sources. And what is Ikar HaSimcha? Simchas HaMitzvos. Ribono Shel Olam, you gave me the opportunity to do mitzvahs. If only we could appreciate what a mitzvah is. A person puts on tefillin. Tefillin shel yad has an impact on one of the highest worlds. And tefillin shel rosh reaches the highest of all worlds, what's called atzilus. Do we realize the impact of our actions, of our maisim, of our mitzvahs, of our chesed? Do we appreciate what God has given us as opportunities to fulfill mitzvahs and achieve infinity, immortality? Do we appreciate the fact that we have been given the intellect bestowed upon us by the chesed of Hashem to study His Torah, His wisdom? The Or Chaim HaKadosh writes, he lived 5 centuries ago in Tzfat, that if we would appreciate the noam, the enjoyment of Torah, we would never give up an opportunity, a moment of time that we could use to study God's Torah. And the Baal Tanya, of course, is famous for saying that the moment a person studies Torah and he takes the wisdom of God into his seichel, he is then unified together with the wisdom of God, the knowledge of God, the concepts of the Torah. And that makes him one with God himself, because God and his wisdom are one. Therefore, Ikar HaSimcha, He Simchas HaMitzvos, Bechinas Pikudei Hashem Yesharim V'Samchei Lev. Every one of God's mitzvahs will bring us simcha. Mishemamin B'Hashem Yisbarach V'Toras HaKadosha B'Tmimus V'Pshitus. Forget about all these chakiros and all these analytic, dialectic debates that are taken through the academies of the worlds of philosophy of the Greeks and the Romans and all the philosophers. Forget about all that. We need tmimus and pshitus. That simple but yet profound, intuitive feeling that God is with me. Why do I believe in God? I could give you many philosophical arguments this way and that way. Forget about all the philosophy. We need to feel God. We need to intuit God. We need to connect with God because we feel His presence. We feel His guidance. We appreciate the opportunities that He gave us to do His mitzvahs to study his wisdom. And therefore, Misha Mamin Bashem Yisborach B'Toraso Akdosha T'B'Tmimus U'B'Pshitus K'Moshe Kol Yisrael Maminim. What do you mean Kol Yisrael Maminim? I'll show you a lot of Jews that don't believe, but that's on the outside. On the inside, every Jew has within him, deep in the recesses of his neshama, a belief and a craving for God. Imagine God gave us the opportunity to have an impact on worlds. Worlds. You know, earlier on Wednesdays, I teach a class in Toronto. I just got back from Toronto. I'm just kidding. But it's a class over Zoom that I've been giving for the last 11 years since I left Toronto. And I have to tell you one thing that I told over to the guys. It was based on the Shalah HaKadosh, but I think it fits very much into what we're studying here. And I allow myself this because Rabbi Nosson very often quotes the Shalah. The Shalah writes that why is it that if a person would eat something without making a bracha, then Rashi writes in Masechta Brachas, he's a thief. And what did he steal from Hashem? Because Hashem Aretz U'Maloa, he stole the bracha. So the Shalah asks, what do you mean you steal a bracha? How do you steal a bracha? You didn't make a bracha. You ate an apple without making appropriates. And God has the bracha and you stole it from him? What does that mean? Says the Shalah that the way that God created the world and organized the mechanics of the universe, there's something called shefa that comes down from on high that gives us grains from which we make bread, that gives us fruits that grow on the trees. All this comes from the benevolence of God. But that shefa that comes down from on top depends upon man. Man will determine whether or not that shefa will come down. Says the Shalah, the key and the secret weapon to bring down the shefa and the magnificent produce is the bracha. When we recite the bracha and acknowledge and appreciate that this is a gift of God, then the way God created it in the mechanics of the universe, the shefa will come down from on high because we activated the shefa down here on this earth. How great is man? As David Amel says, that we can impact effectively on the shefa. So why am I stealing something? I'm not stealing the bracha. What does Rashi mean when he says he stole the bracha? He stole from HaKadosh Baruch Hu the ability, Kaviyachol, to bring down the bracha. The bracha is the shefa, and we have stolen the shefa. God is chesed in his very personification, in his very essence. He's a meitiv. And now you've closed the pipelines. You've omitted the bracha, and now you've clogged up the system so that now the shefa can't come down. And you've stolen from God the bracha that he wanted to bestow upon this earth. Sha'anu zochim, what is our simcha when we do a mitzvah? Anu zochim lasos nachas ruach liyotzreinu. Could you imagine? It's mind-boggling. God is infinite. We are little specks of dust in the cosmos, and yet we can bring nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How? Through our mitzvahs. Think about that. And if that doesn't bring you to simcha, nothing will bring you to simcha. This is the most powerful concept that could bring a person to simcha. You know, Breslov is all about eitzos, what's called eitzos. There's a whole book of eitzos. Now I need an eitzah to achieve simcha, because simcha equals kedusha, and the sitra achra, which is the antithesis of simcha, is atzma. So how do I get the simcha? And the answer is to contemplate when I do a mitzvah that God has given me with his goodness and his chesed the opportunity to fulfill his will. Who are you to fulfill God's will? What are you, a sar? You're not even an eved in the king's palace, and yet you can fulfill God's will and bring nachas ruach lefanov. If that doesn't bring to you simcha, I don't know what. And furthermore, what are the stakes? The stakes are very high. If we do implement a mitzvah with simcha, konim lanu chaye olam li'ol me'ad u'lenetzach nitzach. So the message here is clear. Have rachmanis on yourself. Have compassion on yourself. Be compassionate to yourself. Know that you have a great opportunity to achieve netzach nitzachim, to achieve eternity, immortality. And how? Through simcha. By realizing the great opportunity that God has given you to fulfill the mitzvah and bring nachas ruach lefanah. That's simcha b'asiyas ha-mitzvahs. And then, through that simcha, we strip ourselves of physicality, of finitude, and we get to infinitude, and we achieve chaye netzach. And he gives the example of tzitzis. How much does it cost to buy a pair of tzitzis? He calls it gadol echad. Gadol echad means whatever their currency was. A zlatika, I don't know. One big zlatika will get you a pair of tzitzis. You put on the tzitzis, and you achieve infinity. My friend, do you realize what's at stake here? You can be part of Ein Sof. By what? By spending 50 shekel on a pair of tzitzis? Hayesh simcha gedola mizu? He asks a rhetorical question. Ki zeh kol ha'adam yochel lahavin sheba'olam hazeh shum simcha ba'olam ki ma. He always quotes Koheles. That's his favorite book. He always vacillates between Koheles and Mishlei on the one hand, and Tehillim on the other hand. These are his favorite books that he likes to quote. And Shlomo Melech says, in his solemnity and his serious nature, Ki ma yisron ha'adam mikol ha'molo she'omal tachas hashamesh. So the man works 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. What does he take with him when they bury him? Where is all that money? And if he's lucky, he has some heirs, he has children. If he's not so lucky, I remember as a child, there was an obituary about a woman who left an awful sum of money to her cat. Now they leave it to the dog. In those days, it was the cat. Catamon. What does he gain from all his work? How rare it is that you meet a person who's saying, I'm going to work 9 to 5. I have a mechubedika world, a job. I have nice salary. I have enough to live on. I have a pension plan for my older age. And get ended. I go home. I learn a daf. I have a chavrusa. I go to daf mincha ma'ariv in shul. I go to sleep and I wake up for the next morning for shachas. It's so rare that we meet a person that is satisfied b'muah. He's mistapek b'muah. He's happy with what he has. He's got a sufficient amount of money. Maybe he wants to make a little extra money so that he can take his wife on a vacation. Fine. But to work backbreaking hours, endless hours, my Yisrael Liada, what is he taking with him? Because all of life is just a facade. Everything looks so beautiful. And the Sitra Achra knows how to dress up everything in the most beautiful way, as if this is important and that's important and this is a priority. And if he fires you or if you're not making money, then get angry. That's the Sitra Achra. Sof kol sof ma yisron yeshlo b'chol zeh. What's he taking with him to the next world? Did I ever tell you the story about the talus? I think I told it. Should I tell it again? Oh, I'll tell it again. I hope you won't shut me off because you're bored. It's one of my favorite stories I heard from my father's at Molavra. I'm not sure if the story was about Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the founder of the Musa movement, or about any one of his great disciples. Oh, I think it was the Alter of Kelm. Now I remember. The Alter of Kelm, on Kol Nidre night, left his house on the way to Shul, and on the way to Shul, Kol Nidre night. No, 1 second. Let me get it straight. No. I'm sorry. Let's start again. The Alter of Kelm went away on vacation to the Daicha. They called it the Daicha. That was like, for those who are familiar with New York State, the Catskills. I'm sure every country has its, where you go away on vacation. And on Shabbos, he got up to say a drasha, and he noticed that a lot of people were not wearing talesim. So he told over the following Maisa, the Alter of Kelm was famous for coming up with Mishalim, to tell a story that and he says that he was once on the way to Shul, and it was Kol Nidre night, and he hears a baby crying. He stops dead in his tracks. He says, somebody must have left a baby behind on their rush to go to Kol Nidre night on Yom Kippur to the Beis HaKnesses. I have to save this baby. The cry of the baby was ripping his heart apart. He traced the cries to a house, and sure enough, he noticed that the door was unlocked. They must have just ran out to Shul. He goes into the house, and he's listening to the cry of the baby. He hears that it's upstairs. He goes upstairs. No baby. But he keeps hearing the noise, the crying. He listens to a, how do you say it in English, an argaz, an argaz, a trunk. What would be?
A trunk, a crate, depends what you need.
Like a box of some sort, right? What would be a good word?
Baggage compartment.
Okay, some sort of baggage compartment. He opens up the baggage compartment, and all he sees inside is a talus. And the talus is crying. Their talus veins. Their talus veins. My balabas left me behind. So I said to the talus, Talus veint nicht. Your master may have gone on vacation, or in this case but he was talking to the oilam. And he took with him his gold and his silver and all his expensive jewelry because he didn't want to leave it behind. And he came to the Daicha, and he left you behind on this journey. But Liasid Lavo, he's going to take a long, long journey. He's not bringing with him not his silver, not his gold. He's bringing only you with him, only the talus. Hakol yodim shesof adam lamus v'yomenu kitzel over. If you have only a little bit of intelligence, even a guy will understand this, appreciate this. As Shlomo Melech teaches us over and over again in Koheles, there's no simcha in this world. Ki achris simcha tuga. At the end of all your simcha is despair. He says in Koheles, the simcha ma'azeh osa. And therefore those who divorce this world from the next world, and with all their chakiros, and their evaluations and analyses of this world, God is not in the element. There's no eternity. Kol elu amachakrim v'akofrim, that they deny God, ein lem shum simcha mitas klal. They may say that they're besimcha. Maybe with their intelligence, they wrote great works and they got glory and they played chess and they won chess tournaments, but they don't have simcha mitas. That's not true simcha. That's all just a bluff. That's the guise, the outer lust, the luster that is presented to them in beautiful colors by the Sitra Achra. V'apkoras pneihem ansabam. If you look carefully at their faces, you can see underneath it. Al pirov he maleim atzvus yagon v'anacha. This guy looks like the wealthiest guy. He's got political connections. He's on high. He's got Phi Beta Kappas hanging out from his son. He looks like he's the greatest. He must be besimcha. I have to be jealous of him, no? But more than likely, if you look carefully at his face, you will see below it what hides below his so-called simcha, his superficial joy, is really atzvus yagon v'anacha, no matter how wealthy he is. If they divorce themselves from Torah and mitzvahs and belief in God, then they have no connection to simcha. They come up with ridiculous ideas. V'yachpu al Hashem, and they cover over the God and they cover over the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu. These people are not going to achieve simcha. U'ledivreim haroim v'asorim v'amorim v'ametunafim b'vadei ein l'smoach. They completely divorce any mitzvah act, any meaningful act, any good act of any element of simcha. They think that, the only thing that's important is ashirus and mammon and sharchef tzeolam hazeh, is ein shum simcha mitis. Ki achriso mora. Their ultimate end is very bitter. The anu b'nei Yisrael, asher Hashem yisbarach ifdilanu berachman min hatoim v'akofrim. We thank God that He has separated us from all these deniers and scoffers. Asher in bevadei min ha'erev ram. Okay, that's a whole different discussion. Who is the erev ram? Ma tov chalkeinu, ma noim gorolenu, v'kama yishlanu l'sma, bechol oz, with all the energy. Shona magiyim lasos is a mitzvah. Sha'anu zochim, and we merit berega kala, in one fleeting second. Shall asiyas mitzvah lias nichlolim b'Hashem Yisbarach, to be part of infinity. Be Ein Sof Baruch Hu, with His infinite light. V'yanu konim, when we acquire for ourselves chaye olam la'ad v'lanetzach al yedei kol mitzvah mitzvah. Kol mitzvah mitzvah. You hear what he's saying here? Every single last mitzvah has the ability to guarantee us chaye olam v'lanetzach, eternity. V'ruban kekulam kalim lasosam. 90% of the mitzvahs are easy. V'ne'imim ma'od, they give us a certain pleasure, a certain ne'imus. We love to do the mitzvahs. Drachei darchei noam, and the ways of God are pleasant. We don't get mitzvahs that badge us down and knock us down. We get opportunities. Imagine you get your cake and eat it. Not only do you get Chai Olam Haba, but even in this world, you enjoy the benefits of the mitzvah. You get a geschmack out of a mitzvah. Tamu ra'u ki tov Hashem. But the trouble is, we don't think about these ideas. We don't take it to heart. We're not remembering constantly the opportunities that we have and the significance of the mitzvahs and how God, the Chazdo, gave us opportunities with a mitzvah kala that's ne'ima, it's pleasant to be zochet, to chaye olam haba, to netzach nitzachim. Do we keep this in mind? Do we appreciate what we have? I don't really have to go into long-winded discussions about this. Lachenu b'nei Yisrael, because all of our Jewish people, our brothers, are maminim, b'nei maminim. We have faith, and we inherit this faith from our forefathers. Ki hachacham yavim nidaito kama yesh l'smoch. Anyone who's intelligent will realize the great measure of simcha that he should have when he does a mitzvah, and kol mitzvah again. For dafka al yedei simchas ha mitzvah, al yedei ze dafka ikar aliyas hashchita me'agolus. Unbelievable, Rabbosai. Every mitzvah that we do has the potential, the power to end the bitter golus, to bring Klal Yisrael back together again, and to bring the Shechina from golus back to the Holy Land. Asher zochim lahalos kol olamos lamala ulamala, that we can bring up the worlds, the highest and highest worlds. And Rabbi Nosson says that what a person could accomplish through his kisufim, his ratzon, his will to fulfill God's will, is greater than the greatest malachei asharetz. None of them, malachim and ofanei hakodesh and srafim, none of them can hold a candle. None of them are comparable to what each and every Jew can do in order to bring about nachas ruach and kiddush Hashem, and to achieve eternity, and to be nichlal in Ein Sof. And dafka, a Jew who's far away, as we spoke about a few weeks back, if you recall, a Jew who is full of pagamim, full of avonos, he hardly recognizes himself as a Jew. If he has ratzon, if he has a will, if he has what's called a hisorus, which Rabbi Nosson is going to address soon, to do the mitzvah of Hashem, that has a greater impact than what the most amazing malachim asharis are able to do. The Uz, when he does the mitzvah and appreciates the mitzvah, smechim, kol Yisrael b'simcha gedola miod. This is what Purim is all about. That all of Klal Yisrael, every last Jew, should achieve simcha gedola ad miod, ad ein sof ein tachlis. Ki haman zu masanosha b'chinas atzvus, haman b'gematria tzav imakolel. All right, if anyone has time to work this out, if you had 60, 40, and 5, it's what, 105. Tzav is 90, and Vav is 6, is 96. So how do we get up to 105? Just 1 second. Is Ima Kolel. Does anybody remember? I forgot how he works this out. Okay. Hu bechinas tokef haklipot shebasiya ki ein tzavel avodah zara kmo she'omer Rabbeinu. Okay, this is already a different discussion. V'al kain ikar kitrugo visgaruso, the main prosecution against the Jew from the powers of evil, the Sitra Achra, and the main is garus. This garus means when they put impediments in front of us, is to attack our simcha shel mitzvah v'eino meiniach l'smach b'shum mitzvah. They block us and they prevent us from achieving simcha shel mitzvah. Machmas shemachnis kfiros, they introduce questions into our mind, doubts about the existence of God, Rachmana litzlan. Ve'hem tamim shel shtus, they come up with all sorts of shtus to explain what's going on in this world and what mitzvahs we think we're doing. And it's all b'shvil iskei olam hazeh. They want you to be focused exclusively on this world. Shal yidei zeh b'vadai ein l'smoach chas v'shalom b'shum simcha. If we give in to the Yetzer Hara, to the Nachash, to the Sitra Achra, and we get totally focused on Iskei Olam Hazeh, no chance of Simcha. The Olam Hazeh, this world will give you absolutely no Simcha. And because of Haman's jealousy of the true Simcha of a Mordechai and Klal Yisrael, Sheroshem Chazokim Kol Kach B'asiyas Mitzvoseim, the Osam Oso B'Simcha Gedola, because Haman becomes aware of the fact that we do the mitzvahs B'Simcha, Al Yidei Zen Iskani Bahem Ma'od. Haman gets very jealous of the Jewish people. He wanted to destroy them, to annihilate every last Jew. So since their jealousy is because we are in a state of simcha when we do mitzvahs, as far as our observance of mitzvahs, Haman could have understood that it's like any nation on the face of the earth. Every nation has its own culture, and the Jewish culture is the mitzvahs. But when Haman realizes Yisrael Mosu Nasham al Kedushas Hashem, that the Jewish people are willing to sacrifice themselves for the sanctity of God, b'simcha gedola, b'shvil asiyas ha-mitzvos, like we saw in Rabbi Akiva. Imagine achieving simcha at the moment of Kiddush Hashem. V'chol Yisrael Kedoshim, smecha b'mitzvasam. Every Jew has Kedusha and is vested with sanctity such that he has simcha b'mitzvah. Ubazem is kanei Haman, and that's what Haman is jealous about. Shehu bechinas hakofrim b'yoseh, v'alkein b'purim, she'oz nichna Haman amalek, she'en bechinas hakofrim, oz ikar mitzvah hu simcha, ki zeh ikar hachana'asa. How do we defeat Haman? With simcha. And therefore, this day of Purim is vested with the mitzvah of simcha. Ikar ha-mitzvah hu simcha. Ki zeh ikar hachna'asa, and that's how we defeat the powers of atzvus, of the nochash hakadmoni, of the sitra achra.